Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining today for the APC 25 Industrialising Net Zero Automotive Technology. So we're all currently on mute just whilst we're waiting for a few more people to join. But this Q&A webinar will begin at 11:30. You should have all been able to view the pre-recorded briefing that's available on the Dates tab of IFS on the competition webpage. So this is the second Q&A to follow up after that briefing. You can request PDF copies of that pre-recorded briefing from our customer support centre. And this Q&A session is also going to be recorded and available for you. Now, if you could please ensure that you're dialed in either by phone or computer, just so you can hear the briefing clearly. And if you have any audio issues whatsoever, please dial in from a fixed line. As I've mentioned, this session is being recorded for you, and you can request copies of the applicant briefings, whether it be the pre-recorded one or the Q&A session today, from our customer support team. And if you have any questions after today, again, you can contact our customer support team, or you can also email info@apcuk.co.uk to get some more support. So this is our agenda for today. I'm going to introduce you to who we have on a call with us today from Innovate UK and APC. Then we're going to go through a recap of the competition timeline, the scope, the application itself overview, and the value for money guidance. Part 2 will be a recap of our eligibility criteria and some information on some additional support that's available to you. And our part 3 will be our question and answer session, where you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions related to scope or process. So do feel free to type any questions that you may have into the Q&A box as we move through the briefing, so we can read them out at the end and get some answers for you. So very welcome to all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much. I'd just like to introduce you to who we have on the call with us today. So my name's Kelly McGrath. I'm the competition manager for this competition here at Innovate UK. I'm also joined by Joe Lyford, who's the programme manager for this competition. Michelle Dozer, who's the project finance and assurance accountant for Innovate UK. Michelle's actually on hand to answer any finance queries that you may have about the competition. I'm also joined by Zoe Hall, who's the Head of Competitions and Projects at APC, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, Chris Harris, who's the Business Development Lead at APC, Nikhil Tosar, who's the Programme Planner, and last but not least, Charlotte Fleetwood, who is our Value for Money expert and is from the Department of Business and Trade. So we are the UK's innovation agency. Here at Innovate UK, we're here to support business-led innovation in all sectors, technologies and UK regions. We're here to help the businesses grow through the development and commercialisation of new products, processes and services. And we're supported by an outstanding innovation ecosystem that is agile, inclusive and easy to navigate. I'm now going to hand you over to Zoe Hall, who's going to take you on an overview of the APC programme.
Thank you, Kelly, and good morning. As I say, I'm Zoe Hall from the Competitions and Projects here at the Advanced Propulsion Centre. I'm delighted to announce the latest CR&D funding round for the Department for Business and Trade, delivered by ourselves, APC, and that is now open for applicants as of yesterday. As Kelly's already said, we've pre-recorded the briefing, so this really is just an overview to remind you of the questions and that you may have in the Q&A session coming up later. So if you move on to the next slide for me, please, Kelly. This is the timelines that you can see on the screen. Like I said in the briefing, it is a two-stage process. So that means that you have that initial written application, but then you also have the second stage should you reach the quality threshold for the first. The application deadline is 11 o'clock on the 13th of March, and I know Kelly will reiterate this later on. There are no exceptions, so please ensure that all your final application data is uploaded well in advance of 11 o'clock. But more importantly, let me give you some more detail around the second stage, because some of you may not be familiar. This is as critical as the first, and the process has changed from previous rounds, so just let me give you a little bit more information. So you'll be notified on the 10th of April if you've reached a high enough initial technical score to proceed to the second stage. You will then have until the 19th of April to respond to a substantial set of questions raised by the DBT appraiser team, which we'll go through in more detail shortly by Charlotte. In addition, there may also be a further telephone consult around those responses and your application for 1 hour on Tuesday, the 30th of April. The next deadline that you need to consider is the 26th of April, when you will provide a response to questions raised by the technical assessors. You will then need to switch gears and concentrate on the presentation, which is due on the 3rd of April for the panel interview session. This presentation cannot be changed past the 3rd of May, and at this point you will also need to decide which attendees from the consortia are going to be present. As you're writing the application, think about storyboarding the sort of the key messages that you want the assessors to take home. This will then put into it will make your presentation and how you deliver your presentation much easier. Lastly, in terms of timings, can I just draw your attention to the interview panel? Those are commencing on the 20th of May. The slot will be allocated by Innovate UK, and it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to change this. So please make sure that you know who needs to be there from the consortia and make them aware of these timings in advance, please. So now let's move on to the scope for APC 25, Industrialising Net Zero Automotive Technology. We have circa £25 million worth of match funding available. We're looking for So you've gone on mute.
Yeah.
I think you've just muted me.
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Where did we get to? Let me go back a bit. Yeah, it just said the host just muted you.
Apologies, that may have been me. We had somebody join the call, so apologies about that.
No problem whatsoever. So what we're looking for is collaborative pre-production projects that are late stage R&D that help accelerate the UK towards that net zero automotive future. On the slide, you can see the key criteria, but just let me spell out some critical things. So your projects must contribute to the UK strategy in terms of travel towards the net zero transport vision, as you can see in the Automotive Council roadmaps. They must deliver on-vehicle technologies or associated manufacturing processes which support the transition to net zero. They must support growth, transition and security of the UK's automotive supply chain, increasing capability whilst also improving productivity, efficiency and competitiveness. And finally, they must support through traditional or digitally enabled methods, UK R&D scale-up or commercialisation, the decarbonisation of technology, design, development, optimisation and production of subsystems, vehicle systems, and delivery of innovation value. So can I just note around the last point around digitalisation, we have provided a framework tool identifying the key steps in the digital transformation journey for the automotive supply chain to help you assess your particular projects in terms of your digital maturity level. So if you want to have a closer look at that, then you'll find that on the APC website, and it's on the funding on the APC 25 page. But any questions, obviously do contact us and we can point you in the right direction. In addition, proposals must be UK based, they must be collaborative, as I said before, they must be late staged R&D, and they must be match funded to provide that industry versus grant funding request. Focused on the automotive sector, but additional cross-sector utilisation is of course beneficial. And projects must ensure that they are upskilling, reskilling and sharing knowledge into the UK. Next slide, please, Kelly. So as a platform, the APC is supported by the Auto Council, and as such, the projects must align with the strategic technologies identified on the left-hand side of the screen here. So in terms of eligible costs, if we look on the right side, your costs can vary as a project, but in terms of the funding ask, you must ask between 2.5 and £20 million. It's match funded, so the maximum intervention rate across the entire project is 50%. Project duration is between 18 to 36 months. Now, that is not to say that if you have a shorter or longer project, or your project grant falls out of those particular parameters that I've just quoted, your project is not eligible for funding. We will consider it, but you do need to contact the APC in advance, and we will discuss next steps with you. In addition, your project must contain a vehicle manufacturer or tier 1 supplier, so that we can ensure that there's that clear route to market at the end of the project, and it must contain an SME. Next slide, please. So like I say, you can find all the details in the webinar that we've already done, which is linked, and Kelly will give you the information on that. It's also on the APC website. But just to give you a very quick overview, which may prompt some questions for later. So first of all, can I draw your attention to the public description? This needs to be a short description in layman's terms of the project that will be public facing, and it will be published. So please make sure that you spend some time articulating what you want the outside world to know about your project. Question 1 is mandatory. It's around application location. And then we're split into various parts. So part 1 looks at the business case and the benefits of your application, of your proposed project. And that is covered by questions 2 to 5. Part 2 then addresses the technical innovation, the project management, and the risks, which are covered questions 6 to 8. And those part 1 and part 2 will be assessed by the technical assessor team. You then move on to part 3, which is questions 9 to 11. And this focuses on funding and value add. Question 9 is where you download the value for money Excel workbook. Question 10 looks at additionality, 11 the funding model. And then part 4 allows you questions 12 to 14, the opportunity to provide supplementary evidence to the workbook. So in principle, part 3 and part 4 are appraised by the DBT appraisers and the economists, and they will consider your answers to the technical questions to determine the benefits of the project from a value for money perspective. Likewise, the technical panel will also consider your questions for questions 9 to 14 to inform their scores. There is a considerable amount of discussion between the two sets of assessors around the credibility of evidence you provided right the way through from questions 2 to 14. So please ensure that you evidence all statements that you put in your application. Please be aware also that you can submit a previously submitted application once, but not more than once without a material change. And again, if you've got any questions around that, then Chris and the team, or myself and our team, will be able to advise you accordingly. So I'm now going to hand over to Charlotte from DBT to give you an overview of part 3 and 4. Thank you very much.
Hi there, yeah, so I'm Charlotte, I'm an analyst at DBT, and I'm briefly going to be summarising here the approach we take to assessing the value for money of projects that bid into APC 25. The full sort of presentation is in the pre-recorded presentation, which you have access to. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so to summarise, any funding that government provides needs to represent good value for the UK taxpayers. The Treasury requires that any public funding for R&D projects undergoes a value for money assessment and that it meets a minimum threshold. So our job is to determine the value for money of each project based on a benefit cost ratio. So we're trying to determine if the project offers a minimum threshold of benefits for the public purse. Okay, next slide, please. So really briefly, what do we mean by benefit cost ratio? So we ask you for details of a range of benefits and also the cost to the Exchequer, which is the amount of grant funding you're requesting. So the benefits information that we ask for relates to the jobs that are created and safeguarded, the CO2 savings in terms of tailpipe emissions, and also R&D spillovers. We use data from both the written part of the application form and also the spreadsheet value for money workbook that we ask you to complete to get information on those 3 benefits. There's guidance on each of those benefits within the workbook to sort of help you fill it in. We then, once we have those benefit estimates, we then adjust those to take account of risk and to take account of additionality. So additionality is the extent to which the project benefits would be achieved in the absence of funding. So government only wants to fund projects that genuinely need public funding in order to achieve the stated benefits. And so again, we use evidence from the written application to inform those judgments that we make. So then in terms of the cost, so that's the amount of grant funding that you're asking for. Obviously, if you're giving us a set level of benefits, the lower you can ask, the lower the amount you ask for, the better your value for money is going to look. So really think about what's the minimum level of funding that you need for the project to go ahead, and that will be that will help strengthen the value for money case. That's it for me. I'll hand back.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And thank you, Zoe, for going over and recapping all of the programme overviews. I'd just like to apologise for the tech issues in the middle of them. We had someone joining, so apologies for the confusion caused. So this slide is an overview of our eligibility criteria. I'm not going to read out all of the eligibility criteria. Zoe's very kindly gone through it all with you, and you will have seen the pre-recording, but just take a note of this key information. It's all available on the IFS competition page under the eligibility tab, and I recommend that you review all of this information in full before you begin your application. We will be taking questions at the end of the briefing, so if you do have a question at all, if you could read that, if you could pop that into the Q&A box, and we'll read that out and get you some answers. So just as a recap on the level of funding awarded, the level of funding awarded is dependent on the type of organisation and the type of research being undertaken within the project. So IFS does calculate your grant percentage based on the answers that you input. And just to give you a breakdown of this, the funding for research and development is split into 3 categories. We've got feasibility studies, industrial research and experimental development. Now this slide shows the free research and development categories and the funding available depending on the size of your organisation. So you can see in the bottom of the slide, there's some more, for more information, you can visit our general guidance and the categories of research and development for some more information and some more support. So moving on to some additional support and information that's available. Again, Zoe's very kindly gone through the key dates for this competition, and she did mention I might reiterate these to you. So the competition did open on the 15th of January. Thank you for those that already began your applications. As I've mentioned, the briefing event was pre-recorded, so you'd have the opportunity to review the competition before it opened. You can view this on the dates tab on IFS, and you can also request copies of the briefing itself in PDF format from customer support. Likewise, for our live Q&A session today, you can request copies of the slides from customer support if you'd like them, and you'll be able to review the recording itself on the dates page on IFS to watch back. So as Zoe mentioned, the submission deadline is 11 AM on the dot. Got a bit more information on the next slide regarding that. It's the 13th of March 2024, and it's really important to note that IFS does close automatically, and so at 11 AM01 you will not be able to submit your application. As we mentioned, interviews, they are week commencing the 20th of May through to the 24th of May. So do keep these blocked in your calendar, just so that you can ensure that you're available at this time. And we intend to inform applicants on the 1st of July 2024. So as I mentioned, the submission deadline, this is one of my favourite slides. We are actually able to track site usage and submission uploads. Now the graph that's on the slide currently, this is from our previous deadline. So it used to be midday, it is now 11 AM. So this table shows the number of applicants who were submitting their proposals up to the previous noon deadline, now 11 AM. And as you can see from the graph, the majority of applicants did leave it to the final hours. Now we advise against this. We recommend that you submit nice and early in good time just to avoid any last minute technical issues, because customer support can help you resolve any issues, but only when you're contacting them in advance of the deadline. Once the deadline's passed, your application cannot be submitted. And it would be really unfortunate for after all the hard work that you've put into your proposal for something as silly as your laptop battery running out or your Wi-Fi disconnecting, preventing you submitting. So any issues at all, please contact customer support. But I highly recommend that you do this well in advance of the deadline. And my final slide for today, before we move into the Q&A session, where we've got the opportunity for you to ask all of your questions and for us to get some answers for you, is our Innovate UK YouTube channel. So we've got lots of resources available on here to support you with building your proposal, starting your application and making sure it's a strong one. I recommend that you subscribe to this, you review all of the content. It's only going to support you in building that strong application. And the link to this can be found on the screen. Or you can just simply type in Innovate UK into YouTube and it's going to bring up the channel. Thank you very much for listening to us today. I'd now like to open up the Q&A and invite the rest of my panel to come back on camera so we can start reading out your questions and get some answers for you. I can see that we've already had one come into the Q&A box. So if I could invite all of the panel members to come back on camera. Thank you so much. And we'll start reading out the questions. So our first is, are we required to have an academic partner on the project?
Absolutely not. No, only need an academic partner should it bring benefit to your collaboration.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Our next question is, hi, is there someone to contact or details around matchmaking for applications? So for example, as a company, we would be interested in joining a consortium.
Okay, I'll take that one. So yeah, it's something that we we can try and help fill gaps where we know of gaps in particular projects. We don't offer a matchmaking service as such. However, we'll do what we can to try and help match partners who are looking to join projects. If you wanted to send me an email, we can have a catch up on that at a later point.
Thank you so much, Chris. So our next question is around the value for money workbook in question 9. I can see that you're not able to download this and there isn't a download tab. We're aware of this and we're going to have a look into this straight after the briefing, so that should be updated in due course. Is OEM involvement a prerequisite? Apologies.
Hi, George. I'll take that one. Yes. So what you need to be able to demonstrate as a viable application is that route to market. So at the end of the R&D application, how is your R&D activity going to be commercialized? So that doesn't need to be necessarily with an OEM. If you can demonstrate that through a tier, that's absolutely fine. But you do need to be able to evidence that commercialization element. So any questions on that, contact Chris or myself and we can give you some further details.
Thank you so much, Zoe. We've got another question here. Is there a recommended number of consortium partners for each bid?
So it's not a scope requirement. We don't limit the number of partners. We do recommend around the 6. Don't get me wrong, we've had projects with 12 or 13 partners, and experience tells us that that is probably too many. So really, you need to consider the viability of each partner, what they're going to bring to the project, why they're necessary, why they support extra collaboration, extra spillovers. So we recommend 6. That tends to be the sort of maximum number that we think has worked in the past. But if you've got a project that requires more, then obviously talk to us and we'll work out the benefits of it. So it's purely from a project delivery experience rather than an application bid, that feedback.
Thanks, Zoe. Is there a UK content minimum to be a UK based?
I'll hand that one over to Michelle.
Hi, Ruan. You've got to have a UK registered business and your labour has to be UK based. Subcontracting, obviously you are allowed to use a non-UK registered business, but you have to provide sufficient evidence as to who you've contacted in the UK and why they cannot work with you. Cost, in other words, your non-UK registered business subcontractor would be cheaper than a UK registered. Unfortunately, that is not acceptable.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That's really helpful.
I think one point to add to that as well, that UK registration doesn't necessarily have to have happened by application, but it does have to be in situ by the time you start drawing down grant. So you need to be well on the way if you're going to apply for a UK entity.
Sorry, also the other thing, a branch registered business, in other words, the UK company registration would start with BR, or it would be linked to a foreign company, so it would start with FC. Those types of businesses are not considered to be a UK registered business.
Thank you so much for confirming that. I think it's important to clarify those little details. Can the letters of intent for the appendice in question 3 be from a steering committee member?
Charlotte, do you want to pick this up? I know it's not question 3, but just obviously from an evidence point in terms of letters of intent for future commercialisation. Could you pick that up?
Yeah, so there's no specific requirements around who it should be from. If that's, you know, if that's what you consider to be a strong piece of evidence, then that, you know, that would be fine.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. We've had some sort of networking going on in the Q&A chat. If you'd like to move that to the chat box for sort of build those collaborations, if we keep the Q&A box just for answering your questions relating to the scope or the process. Is there a minimum number of consortium members, and do all consortium members need to be UK based? Can non-UK companies form part of the consortium as a non-funded partner? Michelle?
I can answer that one.
I'll have a go as well. So yeah, it's a good question. Zoe's touched on it already. Number of partners. You know, we've had. It's got to have a minimum of an OEM or a tier 1 and an SME. So it could be a minimum of 2, but that's challenging in terms of collaboration. So often a 2 party project is probably going to be challenging to get through. So 3, 4, 5 is good. And as Zoe said, we have had you know, up to 12 or 13 companies in projects in the past, but from a delivery perspective and from a project management perspective, they can be very difficult to manage, particularly if you're the lead. So the other part of that question was, I'm just scrolling down. Oh yeah, so need to be UK based. So to actually attract or to get the grant, yes, they do need to be UK based, but they can be a project partner even if they're non-UK based, but they would be non-funded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to add to that, if they are a project partner that's non-funded, their costs associated with the project can be attributable to the project costs. But in order to be attributed to the project costs, you will need to partake in the delivery requirements, which is attending QRMs, etc. going forward.
Thank you so much, Zoe and Chris and Michelle. If there's any follow-ups at all, do pop your question into the Q&A box. We can read it out. We've got plenty of time to answer all of your questions today, so we do encourage you to keep them coming. This is your opportunity to ask any of those sort of niche questions and get the answers to them today to support your application process. What weighting is applied to the global opportunities for UK research and development as opposed to using this work with UK manufacture?
Charlotte, that's a you question.
Yeah, so in terms of our value for money assessment, what we're interested in is jobs that are based in the UK and R&D spend that is happening in the UK. Where, you know, where that spend is happening in the UK, there's likely to be greater spillovers than if it's happening outside the UK. And obviously, if there's no manufacturing jobs happening in the UK, then that's obviously going to have a limit on the jobs benefits that you can present. I think that's answered that possibly.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. And again, just to reiterate, if you have any follow-up questions at all, please do put them into the Q&A chat, Q&A box, and we can get them answered for you. There was a message regarding the chat box and it being disabled. I've now corrected that. So if you'd like to do any networking within the chat, you're more than able to do so now. Our next question is, what is the FEC percentage for potential academic partners?
Okay, so this is 80% with 20%. Joe, do you want to go into more detail on that? Do you know this inside out?
Hopefully, Zoe, yeah. So you get 80% of the full economic costs. So, for example, if your academic costs were £100,000, and those would be inserted into your JES form as your project costs, but then Innovate UK would recognise the 80% amount. So £100,000 would actually be, as far as the project is concerned, £80,000 project costs, and you would receive 100% of the grant against the 80,000. I hope that makes sense. Michelle, is that correct? Anything to add?
Well, Michelle, you're muted, but just to add you'll need to submit a JES form to receive the additional 20%. So JES is completely separate from us. You'll need to contact them directly if you have any questions related to it.
Yeah, I was going to add that as well. You do need to be JES registered, so get that done as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Joe. How much weight is added to the value for money and supporting competitiveness? It may be the case that a project is giving a unique selling point to a small company who may not want to sell on the technology and keep it in a niche market. Are such projects at a disadvantage?
Shall I do that one? In answer to that, so from our value for money perspective, what we're interested in is that the project can deliver a minimum threshold of benefits through jobs or through R&D spillover benefits or through tailpipe emissions. And if it meets that threshold, then we would consider it value for money. So if it's not able to offer those three benefits, then there's going to be other projects that government can fund that can offer them offer higher benefits. I don't know if Zoe has anything to add on that at all or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've summed it up there. What I would say is come and talk to the APC, and we can advise you whether the effort spent on filling in this application is worthwhile. What I would say to everybody on the call is please don't underestimate the time and effort it's going to take to fill in an APC application. And as Kelly sort of pointed out to start off with, we're here, and the purpose of today is to provide you with as much information to provide you to allow you to create the best case, the best application you can. So please utilise us, and in particular examples like you've just quoted there, come to us. It's probably one for a conversation rather than a response at this point in time. But fundamentally, what Charlotte said, that's how the BCR is calculated.
Thank you so much to both of you for answering that. What I think might be a good opportunity to do so is if we just go on to our final slide whilst we're still answering questions, because if there is any follow-up questions where they need to contact you directly, they can see the contact information nice and clearly, and they can do that immediately.
And
again,
it's worth noting actually, Kelly, as well, if you do have specific value for money questions, then direct those through the APC, but obviously we can contact Charlotte and her team to advise accordingly. So, we are able to do that and get the DBT support on those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. Our next question, our project would support both automotive and other sectors such as HVAC and industrial drivers or drives possibly. Can we include all of the project costs in our application? This might be a question for Michelle.
I'll pick it up in the first instance. Chris, you might want to interject, and then Michelle, you can mop up if we've missed anything. So it is automotive centric. So your first application, your primary application for the technology needs to be automotive. Obviously, if there are crossover benefits to alternative sectors, it is beneficial. So if you are producing a component that has benefits, primary application automotive, that could be then used on, say, rail or something like marine, then that is fine. But we would probably advise you to have a conversation with the APC just to advise you about the detail around that.
Yeah, I think if your application is trying to do lots and lots of technology development for lots and lots of different sectors, that might just dilute your project. It needs to be automotive focused, and if you have got a lot of costs in there around HVAC and industrial drives, other sectors, it's not really suitable in the project costs. So so the answer would be no, you can't include all of the project costs in your application, but we'd happy to have a chat if you wanted to sort of take us through that.
So that one might be worth following up with the team at their email address, info@apc.uk.uk. I forgot the email halfway through then, that wasn't great. What were the two kinds of UK businesses that do not qualify? You said one was a branch business starting with BR, and the other one, I believe, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, it was FC.
Yeah, FC stand for foreign company. Your second part of the question regarding you being a subsidiary of a US company, just one thing I wanted to point out, that when you determine the size of your business, even though you individually qualify as an SME, if your parent company owns more than 50% of your business, and they also produce consolidated accounts. Your size, your company size will be based on the size of your parent company. So if your parent company is a large company, you would only be entitled to the 50% and not the 70% funding.
I think you've covered two questions in one there, Michelle. Well done.
Just these little things that I think of when I'm doing my reviews.
These are all the things that they'll find helpful as well when they're doing their application as well, isn't it? Keep these questions coming. We like them. What proportion of foreign ownership is permitted for APC projects? We're a UK SME with 75%, I believe 75% possibly foreign ownership.
That is permissible, but again, the size of your company will be then based on the size of your parent company.
Yeah, and the thing to note there is the benefits to the UK, as per Charlotte's information earlier on. You know, the benefits need to be realised within the UK, not back to the global ownership.
Yeah, and again, all your labour has to be UK based. Your project has to, all the project work has to be done in the UK as well. So
one of the ways that you can do that is by gaining technology transfer from your headquarters if you are building capability and technology and know-how in the UK. That's another way that you can do it. If your HQ is overseas but you're building capability here, then obviously you're building capability and you have costs, you have project costs here. That's fine as well. That's a good way to do it.
On that note from Chris as well, if you do have any people coming from your HQ to do any of the project work, their costs would need to go in as a subcontractor. And because the company is related to the partner applicant, you have to make sure that your costs have no element of profit.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I want you on every single one of my applicant briefings for the finance section, if you don't mind. Moving on to our next question. Does APC have a definition for automotive available? For example, does this include agriculture and or off-highway?
In answer to the specifics, yes, it does include agricultural off-highway. Generally, it is license plateable vehicles, but not exclusively, because some off-highway vehicles don't have license plates. But typically, that's what we would classify them as: two-wheel, four-wheel, off-highway, on-highway, agricultural, all in scope. If you're at all unclear or in doubt, just get in touch, reach out, and we can clarify that very quickly for you.
And just to reiterate that it needs to be on vehicle technology in the majority. Yeah. So just an extension of Chris's response there.
Thank you both so much. And we've had a question around accessing the application questions as a PDF or a Word document. This is possible, and there's a couple of routes to go down. If there was something that you wanted to support with in terms of reasonable adjustments, you can contact our customer support team, whether that be by telephone or email, your preference, as you prefer. If you'd like just a quick and easy way to print the application form, you can do so from your print settings within your browser. You can right click and you can just print as a PDF or download as a Word document. Alternatively, if you scroll to the very bottom of your application on IFS, there is a print button there for you to print off your application form as you've completed it. And also on the How to Apply tab on IFS, when you sort of first see the initial snapshot of the competition and you have that tabbed view, if you go to the How to Apply tab, it actually lists out every single question within the application, including all of the appendices. So you can then print that off as a PDF or as a Word document, again, as your preference. So there's a few possible routes. I'd encourage you to contact customer support in your first instance. And if there's any follow-ups regarding that, just let us know. Our next question is, what falls under the automotive category of this competition? On highway only? This might be a follow-up question.
Yeah, I think we've covered that already.
I think it's covered, Mike. So so basically on highway, off highway, agricultural, commercial vehicle, passenger car, two-wheel. It's pretty much all in, as long as it goes on road and it's got a registration plate in general. So hopefully that clarifies it, Mike.
Thank you so much, Chris. And we've another question. Would it be acceptable to build a product which will initially be sold overseas? However, technology, delivery capability and manufacturing capability would be in the UK. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that, I think it is okay. I mean, it depends on the partners, the rest of the partners in the consortium. Depends on yeah, it depends on the outputs from the project. From a value for money perspective, CO2 is captured in the UK only. So obviously, if the product is being sold overseas, that CO2 it doesn't come into play. But it is possible to do that. There are other ways. So there's jobs and there's future investment and R&D spillovers that all come into be able to counteract if you don't have enough CO2 on your application that's in the UK. Or tailpipe CO2 savings, sorry, just to clarify that.
Thank you so much, Chris. And what seems to be our final question, but I encourage you, please ask us some more. We're here to help. We want to answer all of your questions. So any others that have popped up, pop them into the Q&A for us now. Is a company looking to be an OEM eligible?
Okay, that's I'll start, maybe so you can join in afterwards. I don't see any reason why not, but what you need to have it as a minimum in each consortium is an OEM or a tier 1 and an SME. So you need to tick those boxes somehow. If you're not an OEM right now, but you, as a result of the project, you will come out of the project as an OEM. I'm guessing that probably would be okay. What do you reckon, Zoe?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think the reality is it's the credibility around that piece. So it depends on the size of the organisation and the evidence that you can provide to Charlotte and the technical assessors, that you A, would be able to deliver the project, but B, deliver the commercialisation aspect at the end of the project. But again, talk to us and we can advise accordingly. So it's definitely not a no, but we'd need some more information around that, Mike, to be able to advise you accordingly.
So it might be worth following up via the email. We haven't had, that's our last question. I just wondered whether there was any questions that have been asked that you might want to reiterate or have a little through and just confirm and clarify.
There is just one thing that I wanted to just let everybody know, especially if you're going to be a newly registered business. If you have traded, you will be expected to be able to provide us with management accounts if you haven't completed a full year. If you have completed a full year, it'll at least be draft accounts or management accounts. And if you haven't yet traded, but you obviously are registered, you will be required to provide us with a cash flow forecast, at least for the duration of the project. It might also, you have to include a couple of months prior to that if you've just started. So just to be prepared when you do get asked by the reviewers when it comes to the financial review stage.
Oh, lovely. We've got another follow-up question. I can see that somebody's got their hands raised as well. If you could please put your question into the Q&A box. The useful tool about the Q&A box is we can pull the report off afterwards and we can see if there's any common trends in the questions you're asking, so that we can think about that for future competitions. So thank you. I appreciate it. How often are the competitions open? If we have a concept that's not yet ready for industrialization, but will be in the next 12 months, are there any other routes for funding? So you can look on the competition webpage onto IFS for any of our currently open competitions. And I believe that Zoe, you might want to clarify, but if you contact info@APC UK, they might be able to give you some more information. But all live competitions are on the IFS webpage at the moment, and you can use the keyword search filter to break that down a little bit more to the ones that are applicable to you.
Yes, Helen, I think we've got a couple of potential competitions that are opening in the next, additional competitions that are either open or opening in the next few months. And in terms of the sort of full to 12 months in advance, that's obviously subject to HMT budget, but we can give you an advice accordingly on that. So yeah, please contact the APC and we can give you some more help on that.
Thank you so much. How is lightweighting viewed relative to zero emission technologies? Does that play into the value for money calculations? Charlotte?
Yeah, so what we look at is the difference in emissions between a vehicle that this APC technology will go into versus the alternative vehicle that a consumer would otherwise purchase. So if the technology developed through this project enables the tailpipe emissions to enables this APC vehicle to be more efficient, and that will reduce that will result in tailpipe emissions, then that would be factored in.
Yeah, so when you look at the VFM workbook, it gives you a percentage box to draw down. So effectively what you would say is that the lightweighting element of this project reduces versus the comparator by 5, 10, 15%, whatever it be. So we wouldn't expect in a lightweighting instance that it'd be 100%, but it will obviously form a percentage contribution to that reduction in emissions.
Thank you, Charlotte and Zoe. We've got about 15 minutes left, so if you've got any further follow-up questions, please do ask, even if it's related to accessing your IFS account, any support you might need with that. Any follow-up questions at all? Or if the panel, is there's anything you'd like to expand on or confirm or clarify?
Just for information, we are looking to have a networking event probably in March, so it will be outside the window of this competition, but maybe impactful for future competitions. So keep an eye on the APC newsletter if you're not registered that, or to the website, and we'll give you further details of how to participate in that event.
Perfect, thanks so much for confirming, Zoe. We've had another question come in. I assume internal combustion engines, even with alternative fuels, are out of scope.
Internal combustion engines are in scope, however, it needs to be zero emission. So that's the answer to that. So alternative fuels, it could be possible, but it still needs to be zero emission, and that needs to be demonstrated.
Thank you so much, Chris. Is there any other follow-up questions that we can help you with? Anything related to finances, anything related to scope, anything related to the competition process? Lovely, keep them coming. We've got 15 minutes left. Definition of zero emission. Who would like to take that one?
Well, I'm going to go blimey. I'll see what I've done here. I'll go for Mike's question first, because basically hydrogen combustion isn't completely zero emission. You're absolutely right. For off highway, that is covered and in scope, but it isn't if it's an on road application. So that's the scope answer to that question.
You've seen a few more have come through regarding zero emission.
I have, yeah.
Lots of definitions.
Definition of zero emission. Yeah, I mean it's
So what we say in the scope is it's fossil fuel free at the point of use. So internal combustion, in the case of on-road solutions, we will support project proposals which aim to achieve zero harmful tailpipe emissions. So at the end of the R&D project, if the intent and evidence is that they will get to zero harmful tailpipe emissions, then we will consider it. But it's definitely a topic that needs discussion. So please just speak to us on that.
And I think the key thing there is, as Zoe sort of mentioned, is all of the information related to this competition will be on IFS. So any of the eligibility criteria, any of the scope information that you need to adhere to is all detailed on IFS. So it will just be seeking clarification, I guess, around any of the points that are on there. We've had a lot of follow-ups regarding zero emission for ICE, hydrogen or biofuels, referencing ICE engines. Please define zero emissions. I believe Chris has sort of touched upon that, but if there is anything else that you'd like to expand upon, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone is at all unclear about whether it's in scope or not in scope, talk to us. I think Zoe's kind of picked out the piece within the competition brief that actually relates to that the best. So that's kind of what you're looking to meet within your project, and within the scope eligibility elements of the competition brief. as long as you follow what it says in there and you're able to meet all of the criteria, then it's in scope. If you don't meet those, then it's not in scope. I think that's probably about as far as I can say, really, without an individual discussion about an individual project.
Thank you so much, Chris. We've had a question around how much match funding works. Can we say a little bit more about how match funding works, please?
Yeah, so match funding needs to be a maximum intervention rate of 50% for grant versus project costs. Now, Charlotte, I'm sure we'll very quickly jump in and say, if you can do a project that's considerably less than 50%, that obviously is hugely beneficial. The thing that's important is that might be, in certain instances on collaboration projects, that you may have several SMEs that can take 70%, or you may have an academic partner that is eligible for 100%. What you will then need to do is come to agreement as a collaboration to get to your maximum project intervention rate, so grant versus cost at 50%. Obviously, projects that are less than 50% will be slightly favourable. So again, come and speak to us, but the maximum intervention rate for you to be eligible for this competition, grant versus cost, is 50%.
Thanks for confirming, Zoe. And what is the time horizon for the calculation of project impacts, and in brackets 10 years post SOP?
Yeah, that's correct. So in the value for money form, there's a tab where we ask you to select the start date of the project and the start date of production, and the tables in that value for money form will have will pull up the relevant dates for you to add the benefits. So it'll be very clear the time frame in which we're looking for the benefits. So yeah, but yeah, you're correct there in terms of 10 years post start production for like the tailpipe emission benefits.
It's just important to note that when you pull down the VFM data workbook, that you actually enter the project date. So when you're assuming the project is going to start, which will allow you to calculate your in project benefits, and then likewise, then it'll be up to 10 years post SOP, since post project close.
Thank you so much, Charlotte and Zoe. And we've got a final question. Does Innovate UK, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, have a standard source for their term definitions for this call, as there is ongoing contradictions between different agencies and funding calls? Just to confirm that I'm understanding this correctly, is this to do with the terminology that's been used between the two? I'm not sure it's something we do, but it's something we could explore and look into if there's something that you'd like defining or clearing up or clarifying.
Yeah, I would imagine after this is coming around the net zero piece, zero emissions, etc. As I say, there isn't a joined up Innovate UK definition, but we will have a definition from the APC, which comes directly from the Department of Business and Trade. So that follows their policy. So if there is a particular heading, which I'm assuming may be wrong, that it's zero emissions, emission free, then please let us know, and we can give you the exact terminology according to DB2.
Thanks, Zoe. And thank you so much for asking all of your questions today. We still do have just shy of 10 minutes remaining, and I want to give you every opportunity. Is there a common definition of an SME? I do love these questions at the moment.
Michelle, you can answer that one.
Yeah. There is small medium enterprise for if there's a common definition of an SME. Is there any other questions relating to the scope of this competition? Anything that's going to support you in building a really strong proposal ready for the assessment team when this closes? Any questions relating to eligibility? Anything that we can do to support you in building that really strong proposal?
Did we have that? Did we answer that question?
Yes, SME, small, medium, and small or micro. Yeah,
but you need to define it. So that's in the scope requirements. So Michelle, can you just expand on that? Have you got that in front of you, or Joe?
It's way too long to go through it, but in the competition rules, there is a link to the government website that actually explains the definition in terms of a certain amount of turnover, certain amount of what your balance sheet value is, number of employees. So they go through all of the definitions in there. The only thing is that if you have been classified incorrectly, it will be picked up at review stage, financial review stage, before the competition actually starts. But there is the link in the competition rules to the government website for those definitions.
Yeah, if you go to the How to Apply tab on the competition page on our website, there's a general guidance for applicants link, which takes you to all different areas of general guidance, but one of which is funding rules. And if you go to that area, it does spell out the definition of, as Michelle mentioned, it's quite extensive in terms of the guidance, but that's where it sits. And I think if you've got any questions having read that, then please get back in touch with us and we can discuss it further.
There was a follow-up to that question where they've given examples. So annual revenue, employee numbers, years trading. I think the advice still remains the same. Please go and review that guidance and then come back to us if you have any additional questions.
And if I'm correct, it's based on your last filed accounts, the information.
And it's worth noting that should your project change the size of organisation in flight, so once you've been successful, then it is your job to notify both the monitoring officer and Innovate UK that your size of organisation has changed.
Thank you so much. We've got a few more follow-up ones I'd like to get answered. Can project impacts be broadly associated with UK automotive manufacturer, or do they require specific OEM confirmation outside the OEM on the project?
So I guess I'll jump in on this one. So in terms of, for example, the jobs, we will only be interested in terms of the information we're asking for. We'll only be interested in jobs that occur at the collaboration partners. So we wouldn't include any job details that you put in that are in organisations outside of the collaboration. We have, as part of the value for money assessment, we make some assessments around sort of indirect job impacts.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. Can the OEM be a participant on the project from the EU with no grant funding from the project, but contributing to the total project costs?
The answer to that is yes. Hopefully that answers that
Very
okay.
Short and succinct, to the point.
Short and to the point.
Okay. So we do have 5 minutes remaining. I just want to give you the opportunity to ask any few last minute questions that you've got coming up. Of course, if you do have any questions after today, you can get in contact using the contact details on the slide currently. We've had another question come through. Your lead technology must have a significance and impact ranking of at least 50%. You can also rank up to an additional 2 supporting technologies that can have a maximum of 25%. Your percentages must add up to 100%.
No, you don't need 3 minimum technologies, Kieran. It's absolutely fine. If you've got 1 technology that's 100%, that's okay. What we don't want to do here, because this contributes to our impacts analytics, is for somebody to put 5%, 10%, across the board. So we make a minimum of 3, but if you've only got 1 technology that it associates with, that's absolutely fine.
Perfect. And our final question, I think, before we wrap up today is, what sort of benefit cost ratio are you looking for?
So so our assessment is guided by Treasury, which set a minimum threshold. It's probably not particularly helpful here to say what the threshold is, because it depends on all sorts of factors that go into our assessment based on the information you provide us. But every single project needs to meet a particular threshold based on the monetized benefits that we have asked you for, and the adjustments that we make around additionality and risk. A general point, which is also covered in the pre-recorded presentation, is please provide evidence to support your additionality arguments, because that will help strengthen the case and help us sort of score it more accurately.
We've had a follow back on this one. Just a little bit more information on what they're aiming for on cost benefit ratios. Whilst I'll let you have a bit of food for thought, we've had another question come through. For project impact in the supply chain, is this only related to downstream spend 10 years post SOP, or also jobs expected to be created / safeguarded in the supply chain outside of the consortium?
So don't attribute supply chain jobs in your value for money. We put a supply chain multiplier, or not we, Charlotte will put a supply chain multiplier in that in that. So if you do put jobs that are attributed to the supply chain in your VFM, they will be automatically taken out.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And Charlotte, is there anything else to add on the benefit cost ratios that you'd like to expand on, or have we covered everything there that we've
no, I don't think there's anything else. So the way that we calculate our benefit cost ratio takes into account a wide range of information. So I don't think it's helpful to give a ratio for you to try and aim to, because it may well still differ quite a lot from our assessment of it. So yeah, that's what I'd say on that one.
What is worth expanding on is that projects do have to meet a technical threshold and value for money threshold. So even if they score well in technical but don't score well in VFM or vice versa, then they will not be eligible for funding going forward.
Thank you so much, Charlotte and Zoe, and to each of you that have asked questions today. That's 41 questions that we've answered. Some might have been duplicates, but I'm really pleased with the questions that have come through the Q&A today. If you have any questions that have coming up for you right now, or indeed after the briefing today, please reach out to customer support or to APC directly using the contact details as shown on the slide. And again, I recommend that you review all of the resources available to you, from the competition webpage to all of the websites that we have on the slides currently, down to that Innovate UK YouTube channel that I told you about during the briefing. That all of these resources are only there to benefit you and help you create a really strong proposal. So I really do encourage you to check them out. And I think we'll wrap up there. Is there any final thoughts from the panel at all?
The only thing I just wanted to state about that non-funded partner question, please make sure that you put your costs in IFS and just have a funding level percentage of 0%, because that way it'll show as part of the total project costs.
Oh, Michelle, it's so helpful to have you on these calls. I think we need to make it a permanent thing. Thank you very much to everyone that's attended today. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Wishing you the best of luck with your application and a wonderful rest of the week. Take care.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.